Hey y'all, it's Asha Bookishrealm and I'm back with another video. As you can see from the title of this video, I am here to do my August wrap up. But as you all know, if you're new here, you may not know, I do my wrap ups a little differently. I read a lot. I read a whole lot throughout the month, and so it's just too much for me to do with wrap ups. I've tried all types of different solutions, from doing like weekly wrap ups to doing like weekly vlogs and reviewing everything, but I just talk too much, and that's just how it is. So I thought that the best solution to all of this would be for me just to do the best and worst books of every single month. If you are interested in checking out more of my in-depth reviews, I try to be updated on my Goodreads reviews by the time that I get to this point. This month I've done a lot better job of keeping up with everything that I read in August. I think at the time of me recording this, there are only 3 books that I haven't officially reviewed on Goodreads that I read this month. So it's a little better than I've done in the past. Also, for those of you who are new here, I do not typically review the comic, graphic novels, or manga that I read. I will mention them, but I do have a separate channel that focuses specifically on reviewing those materials. And I do a weekly reading vlog over on that channel. So if you're interested in more of those recommendations or those specific reviews, I highly recommend checking out that channel. I am going to go ahead and just say what I read in the month of August. Now, this is not the order in which I read things. This is just how I have things written down. And then we're going to go over my worst / most disappointing reads for the month. And then we'll end the video on a positive note with my best reads. So like I said, this is in no particular order. This is just how I have it written down. Before He Was King, a merman erotica fairy tale retelling. Into the Shadow, which is the second book in the Legends of the Lotus Island series. Halloween, Totally Psychic. Loving Her, The God of Good Looks. Blood on the Tracks, Volume 13. The Power of Yeti, The Cartel, The Snowcat Prince, Curse of the Arctic Tsar, which is the first book in the Nancy Drew Diaries. The Last Olympian, which is the 5th book in the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series. Bay the Cat, Gibberish, Don't Hug Doug, The Delicacy, Harrow County Omnibus Volume 1. One of Us is Back, which is the 3rd book in the One of Us is Lying series. Night Song, Heidi Heckelbeck Has a Secret, which is the 1st book in the Heidi Heckelbeck series. Arana and Spider-Man 2099. Dark Tomorrow, Solo Leveling Volume 1, Onyeka and the Academy of the Sun, which is the 1st book in the Onyeka series. Villains Are Destined to Die Volume 2, Onyeka and the Rise of the Rebels, a superhero adventure perfect for Marvel and DC fans, which is the 2nd book in the series. Don't know why that title is so long. What Your Ribbon Skirt Means to Me, The Bluest Eye, Jujutsu Kaisen Volume 1, Dancing with Daddy, Missy the Cloud Fun is in the Air, The Art of Getting Noticed, Sasaki and Miyano Volume 5, The Lightning Thief, the graphic novel, which is the 1st book in the Percy Jackson graphic novel adaptations. I Am Somebody, The Wind Knows My Name, Gray Day, which is the 1st book in the Rainbow Days series. Star Festival, Harboring Hope, the true story of how Henny Sinding helped Denmark's Jews escape the Nazis. Breaking the Beat, Thunder and the Noise Storms, The King's Beast Volume 1, Mel Fell, Negative Cat, Boy and His Mirror, Climb On, Night Owl, Magic Steps, which is the 1st book in the Circle Open series. April and May and the Book Club Cake, the Monday book. Pokemon Adventures Volume 1, The Outsiders, Dear Mr. G, Mummies in the Morning, which is the 3rd book in the Magic Treehouse graphic novel series. Last Flight, Martina Has Too Many Tias, Whole Song and Dance, Fox Point's own Gemma Hopper, and the last one that I have documented is Doodles from the Boogie Down, which I'm sure there's like in between 5 to 8 books that I did not document. And my documenting this year has just been non-existent. I don't know what it has been about this year. So like, for example, Goodreads says as of right now, at this point in the year, I've read 320 books, but that is extremely inaccurate. And of course it's extremely inaccurate because that's my responsibility to document. But this year has been a very busy year. It hasn't been a bad year. It's just been a very busy year. So sometimes I forget to track stuff on Goodreads. It is what it is. All right, so I have my list prepared. Let's go ahead and dive into the worst slash most disappointing. So there are a couple on here that I did end up giving. As a matter of fact, I think three of these, there's five. Three of these I ended up giving 3 stars, in between 3 to 3.5 stars. And so the reason why I say worst slash most disappointing is sometimes I go in having high expectations of a book and it doesn't really pan out the way that I want it to, and so it ends up on this list. It doesn't mean that these are just 1-2 star books. Sometimes I have books that are 3.5 stars that do end up on this list because they ended up not really meeting the expectations that I had for them. So the first one that we're going to talk about, because I already have a live show dedicated to this one, is Loving Her. This is a book that we read for the Classic Lesbian Romance Book Club, and it was my turn this month to host. We meet every other month, and we are working our way through the decades reading classic lesbian romance. Loving Her is the first openly lesbian romance written by a Black author that features a Black character in an interracial relationship. I have so many different thoughts about this book. I think that it is important to note that this has its specific place in history and that you cannot deny that it was monumental for its time, especially because books prior to this did have lesbian themes, but they weren't as explicit. It was kind of one of those things where you had to put one and one together in order to get two to figure out that there was a lesbian romance featured on, in the context of the book itself. And this is the first one where we knew for a fact that our main character was in a lesbian romance and they identified as a lesbian. I think my biggest issue with this one is that the author wrote this at a time when it was around the height of the Black Power movement, and there were some comments that did need to be made about how Black women are often left out of the conversations that happen in Black liberation, any type of revolutionary things that happen within the Black community. Black women are often kind of pushed off to the side, or we get the repercussions of these, I guess, movements, these revolutionary movements still catering in a lot of ways to the patriarchy. And so she had a lot of good comments to make about that, and I won't deny that those comments need to be made, but she also worked in a lot of absolutes, and so I don't work in absolutes, and it was hard for me to connect with her on that level. But I do think that it is worth recognizing the importance of this novel. It just, for me, this did not read that great. It really was not that great of a book, and so I didn't enjoy it. But if you're interested in hearing more of my thoughts or the rest of the book club's thoughts about it, I'll link that live show up in the card symbol above. The next one that we have is The Curse of the Arctic Star. Now this is a very interesting situation because I had read this book a year or 2 years ago, and now I'm going back and I'm rereading the series. Now this cover to me reads very middle grade. As a matter of fact, in our library, we classify this as children's fiction. I was very confused while reading this book because it's a new spin on Nancy Drew. It's supposed to be modernized. It as a whole does not get a lot of good reviews. I mean, just critical reviews from journals and stuff like that. It's just not highly favored in terms of trying to modernize the Nancy Drew stories. But this one read kind of weird. So one, the book itself, we have Nancy and her 2 close friends, Bessie and George, are going with her on this cruise. And while they're on this cruise, there's some strange things that are happening. Vibes are off. And so somebody is making these weird things happen that are kind of making the guests uncomfortable and essentially will tarnish the reputation of this cruise line. Well, it's weird because Nancy doesn't really even solve the mystery, so that threw me off. I was like, Nancy didn't solve this mystery. It's like she took everyone else's theories and put them together and kind of sort of came up with a resolution, but then not really. It was kind of just handed to her. So I was like, okay, well, Nancy typically solves mysteries, and this, I don't feel like Nancy really solved much. 2, I'm very confused on the target audience for this. I know that we can have books with characters that are aged up and they don't necessarily have to be applied to that demographic. Like, there is a middle grade book out there that has a 14-year-old as the main character. Content-wise, it works very well for a middle grade audience, just aged up, especially for that tween audience. As much as I talk about how it's so hard to recommend things for teens that are 12 to 14. And so definitely like that's a book now that I have in mind anytime I think about doing recommendations. This one was confusing because it's often categorized as children's lit, right? But I'm confused at how old the characters are. It just, y'all, her best friend, Nancy's best friend, Bessie, has a college boyfriend. When I look at this cover, it doesn't scream high school to me. It screams middle school. Like, it's very confusing that her close friend has a college boyfriend. And so in my mind, I'm thinking like, okay, well, college boyfriend, they've got to be at minimum, for my preference, like 17 at least. And so then it messes everything up because the characters' voices are not the voices of someone that would be 17. So then we have a writing style issue. The writing already is not that great. But then when you start having to do this mental gymnastics around the age, then the writing style becomes an even bigger issue because you're like, okay, these characters have to be at least 17 in order for Bessie to have a college age boyfriend, right? Well, they're reading like they're 12. So already there's this maturity gap when we're thinking about the tone that is used for each one of these characters. I gave this like a 2.5 the first time I read it. I stayed with like a 2.5 when I rated it this time around. If you are a fan of the classic Nancy Drew books, I don't recommend trying to pick these books up because I don't think you'll enjoy them. For the sake of my job, because we are now trying to figure out like where these books should actually be placed in terms of target age audience, I am going to read a few more. So I'm not hate reading this because I know that is a thing. I'm not hate reading, like I literally will read a few more because I need to genuinely figure out where these should be placed within our collection, because at this point I don't know. Like right now they're sitting in children's. But our characters have to be for that age gap, for that age, not the age gap, for that romance to make sense. For Bessie to have a college age boyfriend who comes with them on this trip, they have to be like 17. So I need to go back and read a couple of those, but I did not enjoy it. The next one that I ended up reading was not a strong dislike. This one was a disappointment, and it was Arana and Spider-Man 2099, A Dark Tomorrow. So Marvel has, of course, novelizations of some of their characters the same way that DC does. I think DC has a more cohesive way of doing it, especially in their young adult arena called DC Icons. It's actually a series. I think that Marvel kind of meshes everything together, which is fine, however you want to do it. But I decided to read this because I'm not as familiar with the actual 2099 version of Spider-Man, Miguel. And I find his stories to be very interesting. The Spider-Verse itself it's a lot more complicated than I think sometimes I give it credit for, in terms of like the number of people that actually are some form of a spider person. And so in this one, we are following our main character, I believe her name is Anya, and she is a form of Spider-Man. She is a Spider-Man within her timeline. So that's the whole thing about it, is that like these Spider-Mans are across like different timelines. When you think about Spider-Verse, it's different timelines, which is very interesting. So in her timeline, she is a version of Spider-Man. She has met Peter Parker, but Peter Parker is not a huge part of this, which I appreciate it. He does make an appearance, but it doesn't center Peter Parker, which is, we'd love to see it. We love we love to see it. But we're following her as she's getting adjusted to her powers, and we know that her mother has gone missing. She literally has just gone missing, just hasn't come back. And she's having trouble juggling school and friendships and being a spider person, which is usually characteristics that are pretty much indicative of all spider people, because it's a lot to juggle. Her father doesn't know. And we flash back to how she actually ended up getting her abilities, her relationship with her mentor. Her mentor actually ends up passing away, gets killed. And so then there's this huge thing where she meets this evil being called the Traveler, and strange man. and he is trying to suck the joy out of everybody and raise this other entity to give him this power. So he doesn't accidentally, he transports her. It ends up being a huge chaotic thing for him, but he transports her to 2099, where she ends up meeting Miguel. And Miguel is the Spider-Man of that timeline, but he's kind of hung up his gloves in terms of being Spider-Man because he just has lost too much. I mean, literally, this man has been through every single form of trauma that any spider person can go through, and he's just not having it. He's lost everything. And so he's like, you know what? I'm going to run my company, mind my business. I'm not going to be Spider-Man. So when she pops up, it's kind of like, okay, something's going on. I don't know if I want to do this. And I really like the fact that they were two very contrasting characters and that they do end up building a mentor-mentee relationship. But she's very young in the arena of being Spider-Man. And I don't mean that just in age, but just in experience in being Spider-Man. She's very, very young. And so she's just like, we have to go out, we have to fight, we're supposed to be heroes. And he's kind of like, you don't know what comes with the territory of being a hero. So that whole like great power, great responsibility, but it's darker than that. It's great power, great responsibility, and there's a chance that you will lose everything that you freaking love. So I love them as contrasting characters, but when I started getting towards the end of this one, y'all, because Gwen makes an appearance in this one, it got a little jokey. Like, it was just weird. Like, the Traveler became like a cornball. It was like, it wasn't well written towards the end. I think I love the character study of Anya and Miguel, but by the time we start fighting the Traveler, it was too jokey for me. I also struggled a little bit with the writing style in this one, so there's no indication that this is going to be like a multi-perspective type of situation. And it was jarring sometimes switching perspectives without, usually when you read a book and it has multiple perspectives, sometimes there's like the chapter header that'll let you know like what perspective you're reading from. It was kind of jarring in this one because we weren't getting those chapter headers. It literally be like chapter 4, and you could be reading from Anya's perspective, and then you go to chapter 5, and then it's from Miguel's, perspective, and then chapter 25 is from Gwen's perspective. It was a bit jarring, and I didn't like that it wasn't as cohesive as it had potential to be. I just felt like this one was like started off good, but then it just ended up being a disappointment, which, I don't have high expectations or high hopes when it comes to novelizations of superheroes. I just don't. The only ones that I've really, really enjoyed to date definitely have been the ones of Harley Quinn. Chef's kiss. Eat those up. I love the novelization of Harley Quinn with DC icons, but not so much this one. It wasn't a bad book. I gave it 3 stars. It was a solid read, but I will say it was just a little bit disappointing. But if you're interested in Spider-Man, you like the Spider-Verse, you like the idea of these different versions of Spider-Man communicating across different timelines, this may be the book for you. Okay, so the next one that I have is a 3rd book in a series. And I can't really say much about it because it is the 3rd book in a series. And it's One of Us is Back. This is the 3rd book. And the One of Us is Lying trilogy. It's a trilogy for right now. Like, who knows how long it's going to be, by Karen McManus. Now, in preparation for the 3rd book, because I knew it was coming out this year, I went back and I read both the first and the 2nd book. My experience with each one of these books changed drastically since the first time that I read them. I think the first book, when I read it, I gave it 3 stars. I dropped it down to like 2. When I read the 2nd book, I originally gave it 4. I dropped it down to 3. And then when I came to this one, it was 3.5. So it's kind of hard to tell you anything about this book because it builds so much from the 1st and 2nd book. The only thing that I can really genuinely tell you is that we are getting characters from the 1st and 2nd book in this 3rd book. It's only told across 3 different perspectives, but all the characters from the first 2 books are going to be present for this 3rd book in some shape or capacity. And we are almost getting origin stories of certain characters. And so it was interesting to know why, I should just say his name Simon, because he is it's not a spoiler to say that you're getting kind of the origin stories of Simon. And Simon is back technically because we're getting flashbacks of him until you find out why people did what they did in that first book. But I can't help to feel like this third book wasn't necessary at all. There was a specific character at the end of the second book that I needed a little bit more closure on because it was the most jarring ending that I've ever experienced, and that's what made that second book to me so strong. Because when I tell you that it was a plot twist that I did not see coming at all, it was not, and it just kind of ended there. And so we never get to know the impact of the actions of that character until we get to this third book and how they're coping with the decisions that they had made in the second book that no one knew about until the very end. And so I liked that aspect of it. But if we're talking about, was this book necessary in the grand scheme of everything? I don't think so. I think if you read the second book, you could stop right there. You're not really missing much. I think that if you go into this one, a lot of people are going to find that it's a bit of a stretch. We are creating this whole nother storyline for what felt like the sake of creating another storyline. It just didn't feel like a very necessary story. I'm sorry. It's just my opinion. It just didn't feel like it was necessary. The writing wasn't bad. I mean, Karen McManus has a pretty fluid writing style. I think sometimes her execution, though, can be just a tad bit off. And this one, it was just like, I just didn't care enough. I felt like we had two perspectives, and I almost don't even want to say whose perspective it's from because I don't know how much of a spoiler some people may consider that. But we have two of the women, we had two of their perspectives from the first and the second book, and their voices are so similar to the point that it's kind of hard to differentiate between who's speaking. I mean, at this point, it's just like, okay, so why? Like, why? There was some growth in some characters. There was one specific character that I was happy to see how much he grew from the first book to the third book. It was nice. So two characters that I really did enjoy seeing more of them in this third book, but I would have been satisfied not having read this third book. But listen, I understand Karen got to do what she got to do. She got to get her bag because, I mean, One of Us is Lying is very popular right now. We have a TV show going on. It's popular on TikTok. The holds at my library are completely out of control when it comes to this series. So I'm not surprised that she made the decision to, work on a third book. I wouldn't be surprised if her editors in the publishing house asked for a third book at this point, because they knew it was the perfect time to market. But it could have ended at a duology, in my personal opinion. That being said, I did end up giving that one, I think I was stuck in between a 3 and a 3.5. I still am, so somewhere, pick a number in between 3 and 3.5, and that's where this book lands. The last one that I have on here, ironically, I don't think I've ever had this situation, but I do have a picture book that was a disappointing read for me, and it was A Boy in His Mirror. Now, we are going through a wave, or we've been going through a wave of celebration of Black identity, which I absolutely love. I think that kids need a balance of learning about where they came from, learning, how to take pride in who they are. And I also think, they need to just see themselves just doing incidental things, nothing related to celebration, nothing related to trauma, you're just existing. Me and my friend are riding our bikes to the park, and that's the story. It's nothing beyond that. This one is a celebration of Black hair, which we have seen a long line of those that have been amazing, that have done very, very well. We're talking about a balance of art, text, just the storytelling in general has been great. I think about Hair Love. I think about, what is Derek Barnes' Crown, an ode to a crown, you know what book I'm talking about by Derek Barnes. But all of those books, I'm wonderful, great books. And so this is another one where we have a little boy who is being made fun of because of his hair. And he finds this encouragement and power from this woman that he meets in the mirror that reminds him of his power existing as a Black boy, the beauty of his hair, and, him taking that information back to school and saying, we all may look different, but we should all get along, blah, 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 blah. You get my point here. The artwork in this one was great. I really enjoyed the artwork. I thought it was absolutely beautiful artwork, but the writing was so clunky. This is not one that would work as a read aloud. I would not read this to my daughter at night. I struggled reading it because the rhyming scheme was so forced that I had to reread sections of it because it was just a very, very, very clunky read. I did not enjoy reading this one whatsoever. I think I get the concept, the idea of the message. I get what the author was going for. I thought the artwork was beautiful, but we're talking about the grand scheme of things with like rhyming scheme and whether everything flowed and worked perfectly together. It was not. It was too clunky, and nothing bothers me more, irks my soul more than a clunky picture book. I don't do well with them. So I gave this one 3 stars, but it's not one that I think I would ever necessarily revisit, or one that I would strongly recommend if we're talking about Black affirmation based picture books. Okay, I had to take a quick break and actually drink something because my mouth is getting so dry. All right, so let's go to the best books that I read in August, and I have 4 on this list, which is probably like, gosh, Ashley, out of all the books you read, I mean, when I do my best books, I'm thinking of like the best of the best, like the top, top tier of the month. And so I have 4. The first one is actually the first book that I read in August, which was like, it was a perfect way to start off the month. And it is The God of Good Looks. Like, I was not expecting how much I enjoyed this one. And not saying that I went in thinking I was gonna like it, but I was not expecting like how much I was going to enjoy this. I loved it. It was a good read. This is one of the few 5-star reads that I had this year. This month. I think I only had maybe 2 or 3, if that. So that's telling you something. Okay, so this is a Caribbean book that takes place in Trinidad, and it's about a main character by the name of Bianca. So Bianca has had an affair with a minister in the government, and it leads to a disgusting fallout. Of course, he's able to maintain his relationships with his wife, his family, maintain his position of power, but Bianca is pretty much shunned in society because she openly and knowingly engaged in an affair with a married public official. So she is trying to pick up the pieces of her life and get it together, and she ends up working for this magazine run by this guy named Obadiah. Obadiah is not he's not a soft guy, okay? He reminds me very much so of my Caribbean family. He's straight-laced. He's gonna tell you how it is. F your feelings. Like, I'm gonna tell you what I need here, okay? I'm gonna tell you what I need to get done. And their relationship does not start off pleasant. And this is not, if you're going and thinking this is a romance, I want you to completely like, no, this is not a thing. Yes, a romantic situation does occur, but this is more so about Bianca having to deal with the double standard that comes when women engage in affairs and they lose everything, as opposed to the man being able to maintain, especially when we're thinking about smaller, close-knit communities. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. I love the writing of this book. Holy crap. The other book that I'm going to mention on this list, these two, both of them, although I thought that this one had less issues, this was a perfect book for me, the other one wasn't. But the one thing that the two of them have in common is that writing and just storytelling unmatched. She's kept my attention. There are very few books, and this is not a bad thing because I think it's what makes certain books stand out to me. There are very few books when I put it down, I'm like, holy shit, like, when am I going to get to read it? Like, I could be in the middle of a meeting at work and be like, okay, as soon as I get back to my desk, like, I got to turn on this audiobook because I got to continue the story. Like, there are very few books that have me feeling that way, and this was one of them. The writing was immaculate. It was immaculate, and I loved how she dealt with Bianca's character, because when you first meet her, she's so downtrodden and broken. And I think Obadiah pushes her and pushes her and pushes her, but he pushes her in a way that she's able to build her confidence back. She is very much so about helping other women who have gone through the same experiences. She takes this strong leadership role with Obadiah's company, and she builds this relationship back with her dad, and she finds her voice in a way that is unexpected. And when I tell y'all, the minister gets exactly what he deserves at the end, when I tell you he has the day that he deserves, when I tell you he gets the stupid prizes for playing the stupid games, because when Bianca walked into their office and read his black ass for filth, I was sitting there at my desk clapping, because that's what you get. That's what you get, because you prey upon young women, you take advantage of them, and then when you get caught, you hang them out to dry, and then you continue to do your business. I also like that, you know, Bianca was very aware that because she had wealth, especially behind her father, that she had a privilege and an advantage that a lot of women don't. And her wealth was the key to kind of shutting the minister up and shutting his ring of debauchery down. And she knows that because she has that power, that monetary influence, she was able to do it in a way that other women would never be able to do that. And I like that Bianca not only acknowledges it, but she discusses it as a character. It was just great. And Obadiah, I adored him. I know that some people are going to be like, oh, he's so mean. It's just, but you know, he felt very Caribbean. I mean, like, honestly, I don't know how else to explain it. It really, honestly, there's no other words to explain it, but he cared a lot for Bianca. He really did. And he is not the one that necessarily shows everything at face value. He plays his cards very carefully, and he does. There's a lot of emotions behind Bianca. He's irritated with the minister. He wants to help Bianca, but he has a very interesting way of letting those feelings eventually develop. I thought that us readers getting perspectives of both Bianca and Obadiah, chef's kiss. It was so good. I love being in both, like, inside both of their heads. And the ending to this was so, I loved it. This was such a good book. 5 stars. 5 stars. It was a beautiful book. Absolutely adored it. I will say content warnings for this one. And I should have said content warnings for everything else, y'all. I apologize. I would do a much better job. Content warnings for this one include misogyny, disordered eating, slut shaming, descriptions of violence, and character who uses position of power to entice young women. So just be mindful of those things. All right. The other one that I have, or the next one that I have, is Last Flight. This is a picture book that I love. This came out in April, and I've been meaning to read it. And I forgot that I was supposed to read it until it somehow came across my desk at work, and I was like, been meaning to read this. So I literally just sat down really quickly and just read it. It's 30 pages, but it is based on the author's experience of actually being on that last flight that left Saigon, Vietnam in April of 1975. So she goes into the specific details of what exactly happened. And oh my gosh. So I was a history major for undergrad. For those of you who didn't know, I got my undergrad in history, and you learn about Vietnam, right? But I always say that a lot of what we learn historically is often whitewash. It's written from the perspective of those who have won the war. It's not always thorough, and it's not always accurate, and it often cuts out the voices of those that have been impacted the most. And so, you know, knowing about this personal experience and being on that last flight and the things that people sacrificed and gave up was just, oh my gosh, this was just a powerful picture book. Like, I can't even explain just the different things that everyone did. Like, the author's father at the time had been working for Pan America, and so his boss was able to secure them a flight out of Saigon because they just knew that they would not be able to stay there much longer. And unfortunately, 6 days after they left, Saigon actually ended up falling to the North Vietnamese army. So they were able to get secure seats on this Pan American flight, but then they ran into an issue because no one had the paperwork to leave the country. And so her father's boss ends up adopting all of these people just to get them on the flight. And so the flight itself, I think, was only supposed to seat like 300 was it like 325 people? Either in between 325 to maybe 375 at most. They ended up getting over 400 people on that flight because people were just throwing away, like people packed like one suitcase. They threw it out the plane just so more people could get on the flight. So they lost all of their possessions. And then the pilot took a huge risk because he added less fuel to the plane so that he could fly more people. And by the time they landed in the US, the plane only had 15 minutes left worth of fuel. So he took a huge risk doing what he did. But beautiful picture book, beautiful art. And when people tell me like there's picture books are for kids, you know, there's nothing that I can gain from a picture book, you're a lie. You're a whole lie. I stand 10 toes deep on that, 10 toes strong. You're a lie. You a whole lie. Because at the end of the day, there's so much we learn from picture books. And this picture book is a great example of that. This one that I have, I'm not going to really talk about a lot because I did a whole reading vlog on this. Of course, The Bluest Eye was going to be on this list. I gave this 5 stars. I did a very in-depth and detailed reading of this one because of I was part of my banned book diary series that I've been doing, and I did The Bluest Eye, y'all, but it took me forever to read it because I mean, it's a lot. The content warnings for The Bluest Eye include rape on page, incest, pedophilia, racism, colorism, abandonment, neglect, alcoholism, death of a child, death, domestic abuse, parental, emotional, and mental abuse. And that's all that I wrote down. I'm sure there were some that I could inevitably have missed. I do say that The Bluest Eye is not for the faint of heart. It is not for everyone. It was my second time reading it, and I don't know if I will ever pick it up again. Just saying, I don't know if I will ever pick it up again, but there's that. All right. But if you're interested in learning more about my thoughts and full opinions on that, I will link that vlog up in the description box below for y'all. Up the description box, whatever. I'll link it in the cards above. Yo, like, oh my gosh, like I just can't get it together. I'll link it in the cards above for y'all to check out. Okay. The next one is the last book that I have on my best list for the month of August, and that is A Whole Song and Dance. This was an interesting book. I had been meaning to read this one because this features a main character who likes musical theater. She's a triple threat. She is the daughter of Iranian immigrants, and so I was just very interested in this. So this is one of those books where I think that it is not the best written thing, and I don't want people going into thinking like this is like the best thing since sliced bread, and that's not to diminish the work that the author has done. I'm talking about the fact that this one on an entertainment value surpassed what I think about in a critical eye of like plot, character, all that stuff. Like this one was pure enjoyment, and the writing style I will say was top tier because this is one of those books where I was like, all right, it's like watching a TV show. I need to get back to the next episode. Like every time I put this book down, I could not stop thinking about it. So entertainment factor alone, this was going to be a top book. It got 4 stars for me because it's not a perfect book in my eye, and very few books are like a 5-star for me, but I do think that it was a solid read. So A Whole Song and Dance follows a main character by the name of Nasreen, and she has a very close relationship with her parents, and they run this very interesting like app where they can determine like what restaurants are going to explode in terms of popularity. It's very, very cool. And so she applies to NYU, specifically the Tisch School of Arts, and she wants to do theater. And her parents are happy about her going to NYU, but they're kind of like thinking she's going to be in the business school. So she doesn't tell them that she's, you know, she got into NYU. They're excited about that, but she got into the Tisch School. That part they don't know. So she ends up like basically weaving this entire situation of lies. And I think what people may find annoying is just like, girl, just tell them. Like, just be for real. But I think that it is just that nervousness of wanting to fit the expectations or fulfill the expectations of your parents and fearing disappointing them, because she knew that her parents were very supportive of her doing theater when she was in grade school, and you know, they paid for her lessons, they went to her performances, but they didn't think that it was something that she'd be able to make a career out of. And so she wants to prove them wrong, but she learns a lot. When I say that there's a lot of character growth in this one, there's a lot of character growth. Outside of her just lying to her parents a lot, she has some things going on with like learning how to balance her time. Time management is not a thing for her. Learning that every opportunity you get is not necessarily an opportunity that you need to take, because she gets an opportunity, and as a result of taking this opportunity, she experiences a lot of microaggressions, which is not her fault, but it's just like the way that things were handled. She should have been prioritizing school instead of this moment. She ends up getting so wrapped up in the lies and the issues with this program that she, or this web series that she's a part of, dealing with her parents. She starts having issues with her relationship. She becomes very, very self-centered, not only just with her platonic friendships, but also with a potential romantic relationship that she has going on. And so everybody calls her out, which I appreciate. Like, she gets called out, and she has to rectify the situation because she's wrong in a lot of different ways. And I like that she can acknowledge that she's wrong. I love seeing a character that's able to grow, especially when we're looking at a younger demographic where it's kind of this messaging like, you're gonna screw up, you're gonna make mistakes, because it's a part of growing up, but that's okay. So, we're following her through her first year at NYU, and she's learning a lot. Now, the thing that made it a not perfect read for me was the introduction of her cousin as a side character. Her cousin's coming from Iran to attend a school that's close to NYU, and so she's supposed to be showing her the ropes. Her cousin comes to New York and goes, just cuts loose, partying, drinking, just going to the clubs late at night. It just was like, okay, like, what's going on? Like, I get it. I was that age. Like, it's like freedom. Freedom. And she's coming from Iran, and so a lot of the things that she's doing is something that she knows that she would never be able to do coming from Iran, which I think the explanation for her, like, not going to class, partying, drinking, clubbing, like that, I got that. She's horrible to horrible to Nasreen. She's horrible to her. She blackmails her. She makes her go and sit in on her classes, and then she intentionally asks out a boy that she knows Nasreen is interested in front of her, because she knows that it will get under her skin. I'm sorry, but there wasn't enough explanation for her treatment of Nasreen for me to be like, okay, I understand. The excessive partying, drinking, and clubbing, kind of aligning that to her experience being in Iran and coming to the United States and telling Nasreen, like, you're taking some of these things for advantage, that I got. But sis, you asked you knew your cousin had a thing for this boy, and you asked him out in front of her, and like, she didn't know like how to handle the situation. This is the first romantic relationship. She's just kind of like, okay, sure, go. Like, I don't know, maybe because I'm an adult reading now, I was like, girl, like, them's fighting words. I don't know, but either way, I did enjoy it. I'm definitely looking forward to checking out more from this author. This was fun. There were moments where like Nasreen's narrative like really literally had me laughing out loud, because it was this twist that happened, and I was like, yo, if my parents ever did that, I'd be like, I'm out. I'm gonna have to head out. But it was good. It was good that everything came full circle. There's a lot of accountability for her part, accountability for the parents. I loved it. Except for her cousin. Just that part. So I did give that one 4 stars. Alright, y'all, that's everything that I read in the month of August, and those were my most disappointing / worst and best books. Let me know in the comment box down below what you read in August. What were your favorites? What were the most disappointing? And as always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. If you're looking for ways to support this channel or to follow me on social media, all those links will be down in the description box below, and I will be back with another video soon. Bye. I'm on my own, broken and alone. I feel the rain crashing down.